Hello. Joanna, are we on?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Tariq.
Thank you very much, Mariam. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the DIFC Intellectual Property Law webinar in partnership with Al Tamimi and Company Law Firm. Thanks for attending this webinar. This is going to be hopefully very interesting and fruitful for everyone. My name is Tariq Hajiri. I'm the DIFC Commissioner of Intellectual Property, newly appointed. I will have the pleasure to be spending with you all 1 hour, almost I think from 12 till 1 p.m., discussing this important topic, and I will be the moderator. So I apologize if there's any technical difficulties that may occur. We will try, inshallah, not to have any. We will try to cover the almost main elements of the new law and try to leave some time for some questions, if any. I understand that, from my colleagues that the majority of the audience may be from the law firms, legal advisors, so we'll try to be very brief and to save you time so you can finish and maybe also to go and continue your billable hours. As I have previously worked in a law firm, so I know that it's very important. In general, the importance of the new IP law come from, of course, the core relationship with the innovation. As we all know, innovation is the major source of wealth creation globally. And of course, from here, it comes the importance of such laws to protect the innovators, the investors, the end users, licensees, licensors, everything globally. Throughout the years, investment in technology and R&D have increased, of course. The importance of the technology transfer and licensing as well, it has proven, especially now with the pandemic, we are all experiencing the importance of technology. And actually, we are all now attending this webinar, or most of us, from our homes. So, alhamdulillah, we have technology that with this pandemic did not affect us all. So from here, of course, the protection and the enforcement of intellectual property rights gained the particular significance, and of course put a massive pressure on government to meet the need for this, the need for an advanced legal system that meet the expectations of investors and IP owners. Alhamdulillah, in the UAE, alhamdulillah, in Dubai and the UAE, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid has always, focused on the importance of innovation and the investment in long-term innovation to make it actually as a culture and way of life. From here, and in line with His Highness vision for innovation, as well as the DIFC Future of Finance vision, it comes the DIFC IP law. So the DIFC IP law came as a piece of as we can or may call it as the piece of the puzzle that, alhamdulillah, or that came to fill in. And the draft was prepared with the support of Al Tamimi and Company. And thank you very much, guys, who are attending with us as well. During the 2019, and alhamdulillah was published for public consultation in March 2019. So we were keen to share this draft with all practitioners. We published it on, of course, on our websites, and we took most and of course all relevant comments that came to this draft. In November 2019, the law was enacted and came into force. Now we are almost in the final phase of drafting the regulations, being finalized hopefully, and will be published by end of the year, inshallah. So this hour, I'm sure that we will not be able to cover everything, but we will try to cover almost kind of, because this is the first actually webinar. Hopefully it will be followed up with many others to talk about the law and about, of course, how it really works within the ecosystem of the IFC and in the UAE, and for the growth of the companies. So inshallah it will be followed with several ones. Let me please take some time from you before I move to the panelists to discuss the details of the law, to just give a very brief about the law and the merits or the policy behind this law, and why actually we were keen to have it within our laws in the IFC. Alhamdulillah, we were able to provide a comprehensive and part of a comprehensive law that covers all parts of the law, like, because as you know, in the UAE, the federal law, each type of the IP laws are separate. We put it in one compilation of laws, so it is comprehensive, covers all intellectual property rights, and it comes as part of the comprehensive legal system that fits perfectly with the DIFC ecosystem. The also importance of this law that it is in full compliance with the IP international treaties. So as I just said, the content of the law came in few chapters, several chapters, where we covered the administration of the law, the enactment, the patents, the copyrights, the trademarks, trade secrets, all types, the law. Just a quick look at some of the my role. For the one who knows me or heard about the appointment of the commissioner. There is actually a reason why we created the commissioner's office, because it has duties and, of course, role for the administration of the law. So the commissioner's office has authority to enforce IP rights and administer the law, and to ensure that it is done in a very quick and cost-efficient, in the DIFC. Of course, there are some other, roles that, to promote the creator awareness and public understanding of the IP law. We will try our best to aim to have a zero infringement in the IFC. This is very important. And of course, now we are working on a complete, clear system to receive the complaints, to decide on it, for the disputes, for the fines. This is going to be, inshallah, very soon online. My roles to coordinate with UAE federal and local authorities to ensure that it is actually enacted in harmony, as well as doing whatever necessary for the performance, of course, or for the efficiency of the law. Inshallah, we will try to be very brief, as I said, but we will try to cover most of the topics. So I'm not going to take more time from you. I welcome our panelists who are well known in this field. Please join me in welcoming the members, the distinguished members. I have here with me Omar Ubaydat. He's a partner and head of intellectual property. We have Ahmed Saleh, partner, head of patents and designs, R&D and innovation. We have also Rasha Al-Arda, senior associate in intellectual property as well. So Omar, Ahmed, Rasha, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see you. We have done a great work together, alhamdulillah, for the drafting of the law. And inshallah, we will hear also from the audience regarding any question. So I move to you, Omar, if you just, and Ahmed and Rasha, to briefly introduce yourself, please, in general, in a second. Omar?
Well, thank you, Dr. Tariq. It's really a pleasure, and we're honored to have you moderating this webinar, and thank you for the IC for agreeing to have this joint webinar. with Al Tamimi & Company. My name is Omar Obidat. I'm a partner and the head of intellectual property in the firm of Al Tamimi & Company. I've been practicing intellectual property for about 23 years now, and I'm based in the DIFC office of Al Tamimi.
Good morning, everyone. This is Ahmad Saleh. I'm partner and head of patents and designs, R&D and innovation at Al Tamimi & Company law firm. So my core expertise is really working with all types of innovation-driven organizations in the public or the private sectors at a startup level or at more advanced multinational or international organizations to help them protecting and enforcing their patent and other IP rights in the region. It's my pleasure to be with you here and to discuss this extremely interesting and important legislation related to intellectual property in the DIFC.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq, for having us on this webinar. My name is Rasha Al-Arda. I'm a senior associate in Al Tamimi & Company as well. I do mainly trademarks and copyright and IP transactions in the region, and I have been doing this for almost 15 years, assisting clients in the protection and enforcement of their intellectual property rights.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm gonna actually ask you one question, not related, but I see Omar, he's in the office. Ahmed, I think you are in, not in the office, and Rasha, so you are away, I think, from the office.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm home.
This is the beautiful innovation, as you said, Tariq.
Exactly, that's, yeah.
Actually, if I tell you where I am, I'm in the mountains of Lebanon, and I'm 1,200 meters height above the sea level. So it's freezing over here, and that's why it's wintry cloud.
Lucky you, lucky you. And Rasha, I see also a very nice painting as well behind you, which is a very artistic work as well. So this is something that related to our topic.
Yes, it is. I'm a little bit interested in art, so yes, I do have this.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, actually, and I see from Omar's office, mashallah, many files behind you. So that is all related to IP. So that's actually proves also the importance, mashallah, of our topic. So so I move actually to the first question to Omar. Omar, the DIFC IP law is the first of its kind in the DIFC. From your practice, from your experience, how do you see the importance of this law as a regional IP practitioner? Yani, mashallah, you are more than 20 years, 25 years of practice in the region. How do you see it?
Well, actually, I think it's a very progressive law. If we rewind a little bit and think of the history, when the DFC was established, it received by law an exemption from all commercial laws of the UAE, which means that the intellectual property laws applied in the UAE do not apply in the DIFC. So there was a legislative vacuum, and the DIFC law came to fill that vacuum and enable persons in the DIFC as well as persons outside the DIFC to ensure their rights are protected, to take actions to enforce their intellectual property rights, and could rely on a solid law for the authority, which is the IP Commissioner, and for the DIFC court to have a solid law to address and resolve violations within the DIFC. So when we look at this law, it's important because it came with really progressive topics which were not addressed in the UAE federal laws regulating intellectual property, such as trademarks, patents, copyright. For the first time, we have a trade secrets regulation in the DIFC law. We also have a mechanism to resolve disputes between trade names and trademarks, which, as you appreciate, in the UAE are quite typical in terms of conflicts between right holders. And at times it can be very complicated to address these in administrative proceedings in the federal system. So, so this law has really provided solutions to otherwise unavailable proceedings in the DIFC.
Yeah.
But more importantly is that I mentioned this was an advanced progressive legislation, so it does cater to DIFC sectors such as fintech, particularly in enforcing against misappropriation of trade secrets and trade secrets for all software and technology is key to this sector.
Yeah.
So it's a very important law. It's a landmark in intellectual property. I would say that, and it has contributed to strengthen and better the IP environment in the UAE as a whole.
Yeah, thanks, Omar. Yes, for some of the audience who is not aware about how the legal system really works in the DIFC. DIFC as a financial free zone was established in 2004, and it was required to have an exemption from the Constitution. And by this exemption, the establishing law provided DIFC exemptions from commercial and civil law. So what we have in DIFC, we do have, DIFC is a common law system where it is actually in Dubai and the UAE, which is the civil law system. So that's actually also adds to the uniqueness of our, legal identity, or the kind of, it is an advantage to have both in UAE. So from there, now we all, as we just said, it's about the importance of this law. Ahmed, mashallah, your field is in patents, and this is something that it is very, the heart of it is innovation. So fostering innovation is at the core of the new DIFC IP law. From your experience, Ahmed, how does this new law help achieving this?
Yes, Tariq. Very important question. And let me start by saying that, yes, indeed, as you've mentioned earlier, Tariq, you mentioned something extremely important, that today any society which needs to move forward, especially post-pandemic, needs to focus and to take innovation extremely seriously. So innovation is no longer lux as it may have been in certain sectors or in certain economies before. It's becoming more and more, day after day, a necessity and a requirement to survive and to continue to grow and to expand in businesses. So, and innovation is changing. As innovation is a living tree, it's changing, the form is changing, the type of innovation is continuously evolving. And today what is interesting is that you can have innovation in a very small period of time, having innovation generated and quickly put to the market and monetized. And this is extremely important for our economy and for our country and the region. So especially when we speak about fintech and about software innovation and the creation, these kind of innovations can quickly come to life and can quickly be monetized. So of course, when we speak about fostering innovation, we want basically two things. We want to attract companies inside the DIFC ecosystem. We want to attract them, and we want to, what kind of enterprises we want to attract? We want to attract R&D and innovation-driven enterprises. This is one. And two, we want to attract all the other actors, all the other key players which come to continue or to complement inside this innovation ecosystem, speaking about venture capital firms, investment firms, for example, about service providers who will benefit from these innovations, from governmental entities, from academic institutions, for example, who can be affiliated to the DIFC and so on. So this is where the importance of coming with an IP law, which is customized to respond to the needs of these players. So the first one is, of course, any one of these entities who wants to develop innovation, wants to develop intellectual properties. They are concerned, first of all, about the protection of these. Second, about the recognition of the protection within the DIFC. And third, about the enforcement and the possibility and the ability to effectively enforce these within the DIFC. And when I say effectively enforce, we can speak about the speed of the process. We can speak about the cost of the process. We can speak about the confidentiality. We can speak about many factors which come into play. So us as being really at Al-Tamimi and working with our clients locally and internationally, we really know the pains of clients, and we know how what are the gaps in the system and how to complement these. So from there, we came and working with you to recommend certain changes. So the changes are around three dimensions. One is the recognition of IP which are registered under the UAE federal laws. And here it's very important that we wanted to, of course, to align with the UAE federal laws. We wanted to recognize these IP rights. Now, of course, we have our say with respect to other, for example, or recommended actions to be taken to strengthen the federal legislations to also enhance protection. But this is something on the side. The second thing is we came to work around the way to recognize or to the ownership of IP rights, of inventions, for example. This is extremely important and was kind of a little bit needed some kind of clarification and a little bit of shifting from the rules which exist under the patent law in order to give it a little bit more benefit to the owners or the developers of innovations. And finally, we came to work around the enforcement measures to make it also more cost effective and more effective in general with respect to the enforcement of different IP rights, later.
Yeah, fully agree. And if you allow me to comment, to be honest, what I personally, of course, the best thing is to have innovation, made, in each, of course, country, because, it will definitely cater the needs of this specific country. And of course, the best thing, if it is not made, it can be licensed. And from here, where the licensing, let's say, of the know-how and technology transfer, that of course, when you have great laws to support that, to protect such transfer of technology, or the know-how, then this is really good. And this is, alhamdulillah, also proves the importance of the DIFC ecosystem, where we have other laws actually works together in harmony with the IP law. Rasha, now this is something also, the new, most of the audience will say, okay, why, let's say, or what kind of, new concepts that did not exist in the UAE law. Before the existence of the DIFC law, it was actually the federal law that applies, because we were having kind of vacuum, as Omar said, we didn't have actually that law. In the absence of IP law, we were applying the federal law. So the DIFC has come with new concepts that did not exist in the UAE law. Or how does that benefit the entities in the DIFC, and especially in the fintech industry? Can you please, share with us your view on that?
Yeah. As you mentioned, the DIFC law has come up with some concepts that did not exist, or maybe it was existing or it exists in the UAE law, but it's not detailed or it is not clear. So the DIFC law come with a more clearer provisions and address the new concepts that it may not even be in the region, not only in the UAE, but also in the Middle East region. For industries such as the fintech, it is heavily relying on technology, and it's mainly on software. So basically, softwares are usually protected by copyright mainly. So the copyright in the UAE, in the DIFC law, has addressed some new concepts that were not addressed in the UAE law. For example, one of the most important issues usually in copyright is the ownership of the copyright. It can be like really very complex deciding on who is the owner of the copyright, especially that most of let's say softwares or most of the works are done by several people, by several entities. So sometimes it becomes an issue to decide on the ownership. So one of the most important things the DIFC law come up with is clarifying the ownership issue. For example, in employment relationship, it clearly states who would be the owner of a work, whether it is the employee or the employer, of course, in the absence of an agreement between the parties. The DIFC also addressed the work for hire, which is not available in the region as a whole. So it addressed also the work for hire and who would be the owner of the copyright in such relations. Co-authorship, joint authorship, collective work. There are so many different concepts that are related to the ownership of the copyright. This has been clarified in the DIFC law, and this is, I think, one of the most important things for the copyright in terms of the most common disputes related to copyright. So yes, the DIFC law has come up with these concepts that will be very important to DIFC entities, and it will also help in enforcing the copyright within the DIFC.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. Great. Okay. So that really makes very common sense and very helpful. To be honest, I was looking just at some questions while we were discussing as well. A question like from my the list says that there might be some confusion, and this is a question for you, Omar. There might be kind of some to understand that there might be interaction between the DIFC law and the UAE federal legal system with regard to IP. Could there be any duplication of roles or conflict of jurisdiction between the two laws, Omar?
No, not at all. Actually, rightly so. The DIFC legislator has not established a registry of intellectual property rights in the DIFC. In other words, all the registration of IP rights that will have to occur are those registrations that are kept within the federal system. So the DIFC law recognizes the registration of trademarks that are registered in the UAE. It recognizes patents, utility designs that are protected in the UAE, and enforces those rights in the DIFC. So there's no duplication. It's actually very smart and efficient because it did not put an extra burden on part of the rights holders, but it provided the rights holders with extra tools to enforce the rights against infringement in the DIFC territory. Now, these rights are not only for DIFC persons. So we're not only talking about companies that are incorporated in the DIFC or persons who are residing in the DIFC. It also allows persons outside of the DIFC to protect their rights in the DIFC. So that jurisdiction of the DIFC is for enforcement within its territory. And this is very important because, as we said, the laws had exempted DIFC initially from application of commercial laws, which created vacuum. This was a solution, really, rather than a duplication. And there are clear authorities of what powers are granted to the commissioner and what powers are and proceedings that can be pursued before the DIFC court. So there is a relationship organized between the authority and the court. There are decisions by the commissioner which can be appealed to the DIFC court. I think that if anything, this law has acted as a added value to rights holders in ensuring and providing certainty that intellectual property rights are properly protected in the DIFC, and also probably worked around improving such remedies for enforcement, or improving such quick actions, as well as introducing new concepts of trade secrets and resolving conflicts between trade names and trademarks. All of that has contributed to add value rather than duplication of rules or conflicts of jurisdiction. So luckily, there's nothing in the law that raises any conflicts of jurisdiction.
Excellent. So that's actually as well answers a few of the questions which I just received, which is that you don't have to, like, the IP right owners, they don't have to pay any fees for registration because it is recognized in the law. Any trademark, any patent, any copyright that is protected under the federal law, or as we also say, the well-known brands, for example, are also protected or recognized in the DIFC, which actually adds to the effectiveness and efficiency of the law. Ahmed, back to patent law. Can you tell us what are the main differences between the DIFC patent law and the UAE federal law with respect to patents and industrial designs? How does it likely to benefit innovators and patent owners? And I'm focusing on innovation and, of course, fintech, because, to be honest, for the sake of sharing information or reminding ourselves, you may have heard a few months ago about the new initiative of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, Allah Yabarak B'Umrah wa Yahfadhu, about the new Dubai Future District, which is going to be built on, and focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship. So this is something, and of course, the vision of the DIFC is also about the future of finance. So we may focus on that as well within our discussion. So Ahmed, can you please elaborate more?
Sure. Thank you, Tariq. It's extremely important for fintech or any software. Fintech is essentially based on software in the overall. So software innovations are extremely important to the fintech industry. It's the importance or the focus should come at two fronts, Tariq, in order to foster innovation within this fintech sector or software or sectors which focus on software innovations. One is the protection in itself, and two is the enforcement. If it comes to the protection in itself, as we said, the DIFC IP law does not address protection in itself. It recognizes any IP right, any patent, which is protected and protected under the UAE federal laws. So this is one. Of course, under the federal law, under the patent federal law, we have our recommendations on how to strengthen protection of innovations related to software and fintech related innovations, and we've recommended in the past specific guidelines for the examination of computer implemented inventions, which we can find focused a lot in software industries and fintech industries. And we hope that in the future, we know that the Ministry of Economy, the Patent Office, the UAE Patent Office has been looking on these and looking to come up with the new legislations in order to strengthen protection of certain types of innovations. Hopefully, that software innovations will be in the core of this. Now, when it comes to enforcement, the DIFC law came to provide a kind of insurance to patent owners or to innovation generators in the way it, first of all, recognizes the ownership of inventions, and second, in the way it handles enforcement. So with respect to ownership, the first one is ownership of inventions. Here, it provides 3 scenarios. So it came to really clarify what are the situations, in which situation the employer owns an invention, and in which other situations it would go to the employee. And there are 3 different scenarios which are very clear under the law. And I will focus, and just to cite them quickly, if the invention falls within the scope of employment, then it belongs to the employer. There's no difficulty in this respect. And the law comes to provide guidance on what constitute falling within the scope of employment. The second scenario, which causes no difficulty as well, if the invention is not conducted by the employee within the scope of employment and is not related to the business of the employer in any type. For example, it's a fintech software development company, and then the employee comes to something which is not related to fintech or to software. So this is not related to the business and doesn't fall within the scope of employment. So no difficulty, it belongs to the employee. And the third scenario, which is more in between, in the gray area, is one, an invention doesn't fall within the scope of employment, and however, it relates to the business of the employer, and it has been conducted or created using certain resources of the employer. So in this case, the invention, according to the DIFC law, and this is the first of its kind in the region, would go to the employer. And however, the law comes to specify a process for the employee to notify the employer about the invention, and the employee had the right to a certain fair compensation as a payoff for. So this is with respect to ownership. It's extremely important because now, what is a big concern normally for any business owner is if they want to develop R&D, if they want to come up with the new innovations in the UAE, they want to make sure that these innovations from the IP perspective, they belong to the corporation and it wouldn't go to individual employees. So they need this kind of insurance, and this provision is extremely important to provide certain insurance to the business owners to conduct, to develop or to focus on research and development, to focus on the development of innovations, and rather than on the service side of things. So this is one of the important points which was set in the DIFC law. The others are with respect to enforcement to infringement, because there is kind of unregulated areas in the federal laws with respect to how do we interpret a claim, how do we interpret the scope of the patent, what the patent, for example, in terms of infringement. So the DIFC law came to recognize and introduce for the first time in the UAE and in the GCC indirect infringement and specifically related to contributory infringement in case more than one person contributed to the infringement, and second, inducement in case one party comes and employs certain power to influence another to commit an act of infringement. These two types of infringement are extremely important, particularly in software innovations industries, especially with respect to e-commerce, especially with respect to online related innovations, because as we know, in online related innovations, you can have multiple parties contributing to one infringement. You can have one inducing another. You can have one in the DIFC, one outside the DIFC. So there's also this outreach of of the infringement which comes into place. The first time I wrote an article about indirect infringement, it was in 2005, while it was my first year of practice in a law firm in Canada. And the first article we wrote at that time, with the emergence and the importance of e-commerce and online activities, is about this specific subject, extraterritorial dimension of patent infringement and indirect infringement.
Yeah.
So many developed jurisdictions, UK, US, recognize this type of indirect infringement, and the DIFC law today, the IP law, is one of its kind in the region to recognize these types of infringement.
Yeah.
Last, in a couple of seconds, we have
because we have only now 19 minutes, so I have many questions, guys, to to ask you. So yeah.
Absolutely. In 30 seconds, the last important aspects, also we invalidation. We see it very much in infringement, in patent infringement cases. So when you sue someone for patent infringement, normally the other party wants to raise a defense, and invalidation can be one of the defense. This kind of invalidation defense of the patent is recognized in some countries. It wasn't the case expressly in the UAE, so we've added this as a possible mean of defense for patent infringement.
Yeah.
And in the DIFC law, it gave the judge, in case of when it goes to the DIFC courts, the discretion of suspending the main patent infringement case pending a decision in the invalidation case. And this is something that we've seen a lot. This need for this kind of provision came from what we've seen in front of the UAE courts and the difficulties of dealing with such situation, in addition to all the other enforcement, administrative, and streamlined process of administratively enforcing patents, which is the first of its kind in the UAE and in the region as well. And this will provide patent owners, innovators, with a lot of very smooth and streamlined processes to enforce their rights.
Okay, perfect, clear. Thank you very much, Ahmed. This is really, clearing answer. Rasha, I see your, mashallah, you are wearing a very beautiful shirt and very nice shirt. I'm sure that it is a well-known brand. So coming from this, in relation to brands and brand owners, how do you see, the DIFC law, or how, what does the DIFC law provide, different from the UAE laws? How it differs from the UAE laws?
Thank you, Tariq, for the compliment first. For brand owners, it is always, the importance is to get protection for their trademarks and then the enforcement. As mentioned, the DIFC did not or does not create a separate registry in the DIFC. So basically, the registration will be with the federal authorities, and this is where the UAE federal law will apply for the registration of the trademark. But the second most important thing usually for brand owners is the enforcement of their rights, and the rights granted for them, because of the trademark. The important thing that the DIFC come up with, and maybe they are lacking in the UAE laws, is, for example, the well-known trademarks. The well-known trademark is protected under the UAE law, of course, but in the DIFC law, it gives like a clear criteria on how to consider a trademark as well-known. The criteria, of course, is based on the international practice and international treaties, as well as the practice. In addition to the criteria for the well-known trademark, the DIFC law provided the protection for well-known trademark against dilution. And this does not exist in the UAE law. This is dilution is provided in, let's say, in Europe, in the US. It's a concept that is available everywhere, but it's not available in the UAE. So the DIFC law has clearly considered dilution of a trademark, of a well-known trademark, as an infringement to trademark rights. So this is something very important for well-known brands. that they would know that their trademarks would be protected within the DIFC. In addition to that, it's very important to know that there is the DIFC law provides for different options for the enforcement of the trademark rights. The enforcement can be done through administrative option or through the court. One of the most important things usually for brand owners when it comes to enforcement is the speed of the action and the cost efficiency, let's say. And that's why there is administrative option for filing complaint against infringement. This should give the brand owner the opportunity to have like a quick action through an administrative route rather than going to the court. In addition to that, of course, the existence of the option of going to the court in the DIFC, and we all know that the DIFC courts are common law jurisdiction courts. We know that there are injunctive reliefs available in the DIFC, and this is extremely important because this is usually the first question that any brand owner would ask: are there injunctive reliefs? Because the most important thing is to stop the infringement, and then we can go into discussing compensation and all of that. So this will be available with the DIFC, and this will give the brand owners a relief that they can seek injunctive reliefs through the DIFC court. Of course, another important thing is the compensation. The compensation is a very important thing as well with respect to trademark infringements. Not only trademark, basically, it is for all IP rights. The DIFC law provided for the compensation as well as a remedy for infringement, and put some kind of criteria to assess the damages by the court. One of the important things addressed is the value of the IP. And this is actually where we have a problem usually in the region, where the compensation is very limited and very small amount that does not really address the value of the IP. The value of the IP can be like billions of dollars, and you get like 10,000 dirhams in compensation, for example. And this is, does not match it. So the DIFC has been clear to address the value of the IP as one of the criteria to look at when assessing the compensation for the damages. So I think the DIFC law has provided very important concepts related to trademarks that will be very favorable to brand owners to be comfortable that their rights will be enforced in the DIFC.
Yeah, clear. So I have to be honest, a few questions that I have in mind to ask you, but I may, for the sake of fairness, may move to some of the questions that we have received, and then we continue some other questions. One of the questions that we received is, will it be possible to have a portal at DIFC where patents and trademarks can be registered with the Ministry of Economy? In practice, Omar, do you think that this is possible, that in the DIFC that we can do that? Or do you think that this might be costly? Because as we know that the law recognized the federal registration. So do you think that this is, recommended to have such thing in the DIFC?
Well, we've moved on in terms of registration in the UAE to online registration. So anyway, in order to register your rights in the UAE, you're effectively applying online. So the Federal Ministry of Economy hosts the IP offices, which have portals you can access to search, to apply for registration, renewal, etc. And therefore, having another portal in the DIFC for the DIFC businesses is really redundant. What you have already is one registration federal system is sufficient for you to be protected both in the UAE onshore and in the DIFC. So there is no need for an extra registration as such. The fact is that the DIFC law wanted to move away from burdensome administrative procedures. It did not want to add any extra cost, any extra burden on rights holders to be protected. It recognized all the rights protected in the UAE. Now, if you don't have your patent or your trademark registered in the UAE at all, you will need to have it registered in order to enjoy the benefits of protection throughout the UAE and throughout the DIC.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
No, I don't think we should be focusing on administrative burdens, etc. The law is clear in that in its role is to ensure protection of IP in the DIC and also bring a lot of value added in terms of what my colleagues mentioned with respect to the fintech, with respect to trade secrets, with respect to resolving disputes, etc.
True. And if you allow me also to add, especially with regard to patents, which requires examination, and in order to receive application, you would need to go through a very lengthy procedure, which also will be costly. At the end of the day, we were keen to have a very efficient process, for our end users or IP owners. So we have discussed this possibility or option when we were drafting the law and how it really will work and the mechanism, and we agreed that we leave it for the Ministry of Economy as a federal authorized entity to do so. A question actually which I might pass to Ahmed. Ahmed, I received a question says, does the patent law carve out any exceptions to what cannot be considered as an invention? For example, in India, a mathematical or business method or a computer algorithm cannot be patented as an invention. What do you think about that?
The DIFC law, as we mentioned before, the DIFC law doesn't come to act on the protection or registration side of things. So, and this is left really to the federal laws in order to avoid any overlapping or any contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
So this question should be answered under the UAE patent federal laws. And quickly, there is no so far there are no clear guidelines, examination guidelines with respect to the protection of computer implemented inventions and business methods which are purely business are not protectable under the law. However, computer implemented inventions which fit with certain criteria, these might be protectable. However, we don't have in the UAE clear examination guidelines for these, unlike other countries, some other countries like the UK or the US or Canada and so on. And this is much needed also to strengthen the software innovation industry inside the UAE.
Yeah, true. Rasha, there is a question for you as well, which is there any specific prerequisites or requirements, conditions for an IP dispute to be eligible to be looked at within the DIFC courts or complaint?
Well, basically, the DIFC law or court will apply, or the court will have a jurisdiction when the dispute is related to DIFC entities. So if the DIFC entities are subject to a dispute related to the IP, then automatically the DIFC law and the courts will have the jurisdiction in DIFC. However, parties can agree to have specific law and jurisdictions, in their contracts. So basically, they can agree on the DIFC court and DIFC law in case of dispute. And in this case, they can take their IP dispute to the DIFC court. And again, even if the infringement happens in the DIFC as well, then the DIFC court and DIFC law will apply to that specific infringement. So it depends on the circumstances, and again, it depends on the agreement between the parties. But again, if it is a DIFC entity, it is automatically the DIFC law and the DIFC court.
Excellent. One other question, actually, which is also very interesting, which is related, about the confusion between trademarks, trade names, and how really it will work and interacts. Because as you know, this actually has caused a lot of legal issues. So, Omar, are names of DIFC registered companies automatically covered by the law?
Right. Well, that question assumes that names are trademarks, which they are not. So your name as a name of a company is a trade name. It is not a trademark. And the trademark protection granted is different than the name of the trademark, which you would use as the name of a business, which you would use as the name mentioned on the facade of the business, on the sign, on your letterhead, etc. Typically, there is a problem of conflicts between trade name owners and trademark owners in the UAE. And this is a common problem that we see as practitioners on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes or often very difficult to resolve, because you would assume that if you have a registered trademark, then it's done, you're protected.
Yeah.
But if you have a registered trademark, that doesn't mean that you're set up or based in the UAE.
True.
In fact, you can be based in the US and have a registered trademark in the UAE. Whereas a trade name, you can only get if you set up a business.
Yeah.
Now, because of our federal system, we have a company's registration in Sharjah, we have company registrations in Abu Dhabi, we have company registrations in free zones. You can imagine that we have a lot of trade names that are registered in some place, may have a duplicate in another place, and can also conflict with a trademark.
Okay.
And the experience before is that when we had that trademark before the DIFC law came into play, and we would go to the DIFC company's registrar and say we have a conflict with one of the names of the companies in DIFC. The company's registrar's authority is somewhat vague, limited by, even if the registrar wants to rule
Omar,
in favor of one party,
sorry to interrupt.
it's difficult to decide who that party should own.
Yeah. Excellent. Sorry to interrupt you, but because we have only 2 minutes, and I'm going to just throw one question for each one of you, if possible, because I think we have 2 minutes, but in a very brief, answer. Omar, how do you think that legal counsel can mitigate risk? Because you have the IP assets, you have the operation, you have all this. How do you think that this is possible? Especially for the legal advisor that they are now with us as the audience.
Sure. Well, I mean, the best mitigation of risk is to separate your IP ownership from the operation of the business. So you can utilize the DIFC options of registering companies, that you can have their holding company, which holds or owns the intellectual property rights, and you have the operating company, which transacts by way of a license from the holding company, transacts and operates, executes commercial agreements with third parties and vendors using intellectual property. So the owner is separate from the operator.
Excellent. In 20 seconds, Ahmed, how do you think that the DIFC IP law complies with the vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed for the future city and the future of finance?
Fostering innovation, for attracting R&D driven enterprises and organizations from all types, entrepreneurs, startups, SMEs, international companies coming and setting their R&D based operations. So it provides the legal, the IP legal frame, along with the other DIFC laws, is we believe a very interesting and attractive and important legal frame to be able to ensure these organization, innovation-driven innovation to come and set up in the DIFC.
Excellent. And Rasha, what is your advice for the for IP owners, or let's say not for the IP owners, for the users, for DIFC entities for everyone who is using any IP rights for others. So what is your advice for them to, that they stay away from trouble? Because as you know that the DIFC IP law has fines and, which is really kind of a bit high.
Yes. Thank you, Tara. It's basically all DIFC entities has to familiarize themselves with the law and what does it say. What are the infringements of intellectual property according to the DIFC law? As you mentioned, the penalties are high, and these are administrative penalties. So it's very important to stay away from infringements. It's very important for all DIFC entities to ensure their IP registered in the UAE, so that they can get protection. And of course, we're talking about the IP rights that should be registered, like patents, designs, and trademarks. This is the most important thing. They also should know that the IP rights can be enforced in the DIFC, and they have to actually utilize the options available, especially the administrative option, and be comfortable that their rights will be protected in the DIFC.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we came to an end. It's almost now 1 or 2 minutes. It's 1 o'clock. So we have to, I think, unfortunately, to end it. But as we always say, about innovation, that it is a journey. It's not a destination. That it really requires several laws to protect it and to make sure that fairness is guaranteed for everyone who invested in it, for investors, for innovators. I thank you all for attending this webinar, and for the ones who we were not able to answer their questions, inshallah, for the future, we will do so. This is not going to be the first and only, inshallah. It will be followed by regular webinars, and thanks for technology that it made it easy for us. Thanks Omar, Ahmed, Rasha, thanks everyone who supported us in this webinar, and I wish you all to stay safe and to have a great day, and I hope that we have answered some of your questions. We have covered some areas. As you all know, the DIFC IP law, it is a combination or compilation of all IP laws, so definitely requires several and many other sessions or awareness sessions, which we will ensure that it is done, inshallah. And if you have any question that you feel that you wish us to answer, feel free to send it to the email shown in I think in the slide in the screen. Thanks everyone, and hope to see you soon. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.